remember probably the most defining moment of my life happened on this journey. And I remember he came in and rolled up a stool next to the bed, and I'm 13 years old, and he says, "You need to accept you're not going to live past your teenage years." I took probably the biggest breath of my life. At 13, looked at this doctor expert, and I said, "I don't accept this."
No, you can create whatever you want, but you have to let go of these limiting beliefs or whatever it is that's holding you back or holding you hostage.
Hey you guys, it's Danielle K. Welcome to the Danielle K. Show. On this podcast, what you can expect is anything from fashion, fitness, hair, and yes, even family. I'm the creator of Natural Beater Row hair extensions and Isla hand-tied hair. But what I'm really passionate about is sharing other people's stories, how they went from the pit to the peak, how entrepreneurs build the success that you see online today. So definitely tune into this podcast for a good story and a little bit of fashion and a little bit of hair and beauty mixed in.
Hello and welcome to another Danielle K. White show. I'm here in my home, you guys. I have a special guest, Ashleigh Di Lello. No, I said it wrong.
It's okay.
I told you I'd mess it up already.
I promise you, it's very common. Dilello.
Dilello. I feel like you said it so much better than me. Well, I'm so excited to have you here in my home and on the podcast. I found out about you probably a few months back from Eric Rock, actually. You were on his podcast. And I kind of just like fell in love with your story. And I really admire you for sharing it and kind of putting it out there. And as my podcast has kind of shifted this year, that was one of my goals is I wanted to get women like you on the show to really inspire and share your story. So thank you so much for being here, first off.
Thank you for having me. It's gorgeous.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm getting ready to move, so I'm trying to get as many people as I can, and then I'm off to the East Coast, and you're in Utah.
Yes.
So it's a quick jaunt over, not too bad.
Not bad at all.
And now we're here. So let's, a lot of people might know your story, but a lot of people might not. And I kind of want to start at the very beginning. So Ashleigh created a way to basically rewire your brain, which is so fascinating to me because so many times we abide by rules and stories that we don't need to. We don't need to accept that as truth. And in doing that, there's a lot of freedom. So I want to start with, first, you created this system, but let's go way back to the very beginning when you were 13 years old.
Yeah, 13.
So you were 13 years old, and were you a professional dancer at that time?
Not yet professional, but It was my love, my passion. I danced 5 hours a day.
Wow.
Like Energizer Bunny was my nickname because I just never ran out of energy, seemingly. Right. I loved life and I loved dance, which was a gift to have something I loved so much. It did help sustain me, but at the same time, it was like soul crushing to lose the capacity to do something that I loved so much.
Right. So did you start to like feel sick, or tell us kind of like what happened there?
Yeah, it was completely out of nowhere. There was no warning. Actually, the only thing that I remember being off, and I remember because I was getting my braces on, and I was sitting or laying in that chair, and my elbows started to throb. And I remember laying there and rotating my arms, thinking, "This is so weird. I must have had them held in a weird position." Right. That was it. And the next morning I woke up and could hardly move. I had pain in every joint and muscle, like 103-degree temperature. Pain shooting out through my body. I remember going into my mom's room and being like, I can't do a plie, which is just a very basic ballet move. And I went from the epitome of health to fighting for my life literally overnight. Wow.
So you went, and what did they diagnose you with?
And that was the hardest part. I sought a diagnosis for almost 2 years. We went all over the country, all the top specialists. I think I was tested for everything that humanly existed at the time because I had a lot of symptoms. I got so sick that there were days I could hardly speak. I didn't have enough energy to lift a finger. My hair fell out. I got down to about 90 pounds. My skin was yellow from my liver shutting down. So I was one of those patients that was dying, but could not be figured out. Like, so I would pray for a positive diagnosis. Like, I don't want this, but at least it's an answer. And then let's have an action plan. Because I'm fighting for my life with no clear reason as to what we can treat that I can get well.
Were you in the hospital the whole time, or were you at home?
I was in and out of hospitals, and then a lot at home. And it was a long journey. It was, I remember probably the most defining moment of my life happened on this journey. I went to a top pediatric specialist because I was 13 at the time. They did all the tests. He came in. It was one of those really sterile white rooms. You know, we've all been in there where there's like no warmth.
Right.
And it was those old school ropes that were like paper that every time you moved, they tore. Remember those? And I remember he came in and rolled up a stool next to the bed, and I'm 13 years old. And he says, you need to accept you're not going to live past your teenage years.
Oh, wow.
You're never going to dance again, never have children, never get married. The sooner you accept this, the easier it's going to be to come to terms with your reality.
Wow.
Just lays it out there. And now as an adult, I look back and think, my gosh, like literally just so bluntly to tell me my life is over. And I remember not even knowing what to do with that information, like feeling every spectrum of emotion. Like, how is this my life? How I was healthy not too long ago. And you're telling me my life's over at 13. All this is running through my head, as I'm sure so many people, we've had those moments where life is changed in an instant and you can't believe this is your life and you're not sure what to do with it. But all I felt was, I didn't want to just accept that this was it. And so I took probably the biggest breath of my life at 13, looked at this doctor expert and I said, I don't accept this.
Oh, wow.
Had no idea what we were fighting. They sent in a psychologist to talk to me, to come to terms. They said I was living in denial.
Oh, wow.
And I remember looking at her and saying, listen, I know I'm dying. I'm so scared. Like, I know I'm dying better than anyone because I can feel it. But I also feel deep down inside that if I just accept I'm dying, then any chance of survival is gone. And I remember leaving that hospital with my mom, not knowing what we're going to do, but just determined to figure it out. And it was a really long journey. After about 2.5 years of essentially being sent home to die, we turned to what now is understood as functional alternative medicine. Back then, didn't have that label. There was no podcast, social media, YouTube. It was yellow pages, right? Wow. It was a very different world 28 years ago in terms of medicine and resources. But essentially we did everything possible to support my immune system to fight this virus, both from a physical standpoint, but this is when I really started to understand the intricate brain-body connection. Again, I didn't have the information we do today, but all I could feel sometimes was my body so close to dying. So I would stay up at night and will my body to keep fighting because I was afraid. I really was afraid. I was afraid. I was afraid if I gave that conscious will up. So I would stay up and will it to keep fighting, to keep living. And I could feel how powerful that communication was. I had no idea 2 decades later I'd study the brain and become my life's work. But even then, I understood how powerful it was and how much it mattered. And in medicine, we see it all the time with the placebo effect, how powerful belief is, how the brain controls the body, and people can literally give up and they can die for not a physical reason in that moment. So the reverse is true too. So it was a long journey of regaining my strength, of literally oscillating between life and death for 4 years.
So how did you get your strength back? Like, how did you turn the corner? What did you try and what did you do different?
We did supplements, nutrition, homeopathic medicine. You know, I saw acupuncture. We were just trying all these things. And I was willing my body to heal. In fact, something that I did that, again, I didn't understand was I would dance in my mind. Again, people were, and people weren't talking about visualization then. But one thing we know now is the brain is wired to validate beliefs. Okay, that's its wiring for each of us. So that's why beliefs are very important. So I had this belief that despite what everyone was telling me, I was going to dance again. And so that belief told my brain to find evidence. And there was no physical evidence in my life.
Your brain was healing your body.
That's right. So nobody told me, but I had this thought one day. I remember saying, well, I'm just going to dance in my mind. So I would do that in my tests and scans. I would go through like class and technique, and I'd see myself on stage. And I remember one particular MRI, I just started crying, and they pushed the button to talk to me because they were worried. They said, are you okay? And I said, yes, I promise. These are happy tears. And I'm sure they were very confused because in that moment, I was seeing myself dance so clearly and feeling it. I was full of so much gratitude and joy. So not knowing what I was doing, just it was my connection to dance, and it helped me tie into doing what I loved most again. For those 6 years that I did that, because I it took 6 years for me to have enough strength to go back to dance. 4 years of fighting between life and death, and then another 2 years to strength train and build up strength. For those 6 years, I was wiring those neural connections as if I had been dancing without knowing that. And why that matters, because people talk about visualization all the time. We really have that capacity to create something that our brain and body encode as real. So when I went back to dancing after a 6-year absence, I'm almost 20 years old. Like, you don't meet professional athletes, professional dancers who are like, hey, I took from age 14 to 20 off. Yeah. Here I am. And I mean, it took a lot of courage to walk back in that studio and start over as a woman, not a girl.
Yeah.
But even then, it didn't make sense how fast my capacity came back to my peers. Ballroom is a competitive dance. So my peers had been all over the world competing. They had titles. And at 20, I started to reach them and then start to beat them in competitions. And I remember just myself being shocked and literally being like, I don't know, God is blessing me. But he was, but also in the capacity we each have, which is that capacity to create and encode a real memory that now it was just a physical execution.
What's so interesting is you're telling me this. I'm like, your brain essentially doesn't know that you're not dancing. It just sees you dancing. And so it remembers the routines and the patterns and the things. So then when you go to dance, your brain already has that memory. Is that true for you?
Yeah, absolutely. We all have that capacity. As long as the key is we have to have brain-heart coherence. And we've mapped, because we actually have neurons in the heart. There has to be a feeling. For it to become a real neural memory, it's not just seeing it, it's actually feeling it,
okay,
right?
That makes sense.
Because the strongest attachment our brain has to any experience in our life always has strong emotions, right? If you look at your past, you can remember details, but you feel it viscerally in your body. That's the strongest attachment that makes it real.
Right.
So when it comes to visualizing, it's not just seeing, it's feeling what that feels. And when we do that, like, this is why I love the brain, we're jumping ahead, we all have that capacity in whatever we're wanting to experience and create in our life. And it doesn't have to just be a physical execution. It's really anything.
Right.
So I did that without knowing.
Yeah. It's so interesting. A lot of times we create something and then we're like, wait, how did I do that? And then you have to dive back in and figure out how you did that so that you can now teach other people. Don't you think too, I mean, I always feel like people can even cause themselves to get sick based off of like just their stories that are running in their mind. Their body literally creates a virus, but if your brain has the power to do that, then it should have the power to heal it. Yeah. So that's so crazy that like when you finally healed, were the medical experts just like, we don't know how this is a miracle. Like there's no explanation. There's no like medical explanation for it.
Yeah. And especially back then, and the sad thing was a lot didn't even want to hear about the journey to get there. And I find it just didn't understand. And I think there was a sense of, well, you're just a miracle case, right? Versus, well, let's look at all the pieces that contribute to this.
You can't tell them that. That might ruin their practice a little bit.
It's so interesting because on that note, and I speak at medical conferences, I'm like, all through medicine, again, is the placebo effect. That is how we do different studies on drugs and procedures. And we see actual evidence of how powerful beliefs are. People have had fake surgeries and had equal outcomes, right? Yeah. We can inject saline and get an equal result as to actually injecting medicine because that belief is so powerful in an outcome. And it's the expectation of that outcome that matters. Like really interesting study just for people to wrap their head around that was just done in England. Apparently now we have they've discovered a new gene mutation that some people can better offload carbon dioxide and utilize oxygen. So meaning they probably have an athletic advantage, right? Because their lungs have a greater capacity. So they took 2 groups of people, put them in 2 groups and tested them. Then they came and told one group, you have the gene mutation and we're going to put you through some athletic experiences. So you're going to probably perform better, right? Then they go to the next group and say, sorry, you don't have the gene mutation, so you're probably going to struggle, right? So then everybody goes through these tests. As you can imagine, the people told they had the gene did better. Now, on the surface level, great. But
Right.
deeper is that in both groups, they had people who had the gene mutation and people who didn't.
Oh.
In both.
And they just told them that.
That's right.
Oh, wow.
But what's crazy and what really points to what we're talking about is the people in the group who were told they hadn't, but didn't in fact have the gene mutation, outperformed
Oh, wow.
the people who had
Said to
it,
try harder.
but were told they didn't, which
crazy.
points that expectation is greater than genes.
Yeah, I believe
And
that.
that's where the belief is not just the belief in something, it's the belief and the expectation of what's possible
Right.
that allows us to
the,
do
the,
amazing
the genes
things.
is like we're all human, right?
Right.
But we also have like a soul, and it's like our
Exactly.
soul can
Yeah.
speak. We're a soul and we're a human.
That's right.
You know, so it's like which one's the more powerful version?
Well, now we're learning more and more studies that genes are the much less powerful.
Yes.
Which is great because we used to think, well, sorry, your
It's
genes,
my genetic gene
this is
pool.
who you
Yeah,
are, right?
yeah.
And the brain is fixed. We used to think that as well. And now
Right.
we know the brain can change till the day we die.
Well, that's so cool because now it changes the game. You know, it really gives people back the power where it's like, no, you can create whatever you want, but you have to let go of these limiting beliefs or whatever it is that's holding you back or holding you hostage.
Right.
So you start dancing again. This
Yes.
is crazy, and you start competing and start winning. Are your dance partner is your husband, or how did this
He
happen?
became my partner after we got married.
Okay.
We actually met in college when we were both competing, but we had different partners. And my partner and I loved him so dearly, and we were having such great success that I wanted to stay in that partnership nonetheless. But when I met my husband, I also was like, I want to keep this separate.
Yeah.
In the ballroom world, a lot of couples can end up together.
Yeah.
Because you're with each other all the time. And if you've watched Latin ballroom, it's a little sexy.
Yeah,
so there's
yeah.
some intimacy that's happening there.
Right.
So we competed against each other while we dated.
Oh, really?
And yes, added some good spice,
Yeah,
you know?
that's funny.
Loved defeating him.
Right.
No, and
That's
then
funny.
we started dancing when we got married, which is interesting, was not even the plan. Like academics was also like equally important to me.
Yeah.
But then we realized, man, we have this love, this passion. I fought to do it again. There's only a small window you can do it
Right.
professionally.
I bet you guys were so good too because you were actually together, so that chemistry probably actually showed up on stages.
Yeah,
So-
it did. And then sometimes, also we had to like override a marital fight and go
Yeah,
on stage.
yeah. Unless you're
Or I
mad.
was like, let's do the paso doble. Like, I just want to do the paso doble,
like,
which
act
is like
sexy,
the
act
bullfight
sexy.
dance.
Yeah.
So it was, but it was a beautiful thing to be able to share
Yeah.
with your spouse. And we had an incredible career. So You Think You Can Dance. We competed against each other
Yeah.
on that show because we made
Oh,
it
okay.
separately.
Oh,
and
how
then,
funny.
Yeah,
Yeah.
10 girls, 10 boys make it. We had different partners, only married couple, but
Mm.
we got to have that experience together. We both went to the finale.
Right.
Then finally got to dance with each other.
Very nice.
So that was really incredible.
So you were professional dancers at that time?
Yes.
And married?
Yes.
And was that like your full-time job?
It was. Yep. We traveled all over and performed in different shows. Then we did that show. Then we did Broadway and headlined a show there. And then we were touring. Then we lived in LA and worked in film and television and did Dancing with the Stars. And
wow.
that was our life. And it was like amazing and miraculous. And to go
Right.
from barely being able to lift a finger
And
to
then feeling like you're on the top of the world
That's right.
again.
8 shows a week.
Yeah.
And I was also a personal trainer because like, I had loved and seen how strength training gave me my strength back to do what I loved.
Yeah.
And it was literally like, we're at the top of the mountain. I defied the odds. Look, like here
That's
we
crazy.
are. And then it was round 2 and I got knocked off the mountain
When
again.
did you have your kids?
I have one daughter, just
Okay,
one.
just one.
Because she was 2 when my second health experience started. And that changed our trajectory.
And everything was fine with the delivery of your baby and everything healthy and good there?
Yep. She's fantastic. And that was another miracle because they had told me
You couldn't have kids?
wouldn't have kids, especially because I was sick through all that very important hormonal time as a female. And so she was miraculous and she was healthy and she was traveling with us. And then I needed to have a second hip surgery because our career's tough on the
Yeah.
body. And I'd already had one.
Okay.
And so she was 1 when my other hip started. And and you have to wait at least a year to get pregnant because you can undo the surgery
okay.
in the delivery.
So you had hip problems and had surgery before you had your
Yeah,
daughter.
I did.
And everything was fine though? You healed,
Yep,
recovered?
it was a tough recovery, but 8 months later, I was back in our career. And they said most likely the other hip would need to be done too. It wasn't a
Right.
replacement, it's a labral repair.
Okay.
It's very common in athletes that do a lot of repetitive motion, but part of it is also genetic, which I didn't know. And I had no problems growing up
Yeah.
until it just hit me. So when it started and we wanted more kids, we had tried everything to not have surgery. We knew I needed to. And so with her, she was just barely turned 2, and I'm like, well, let's do the surgery. And I expected it to go smooth the same way. I'm like, I've done this before. I know it's hard. It's going to be extra hard because I can't pick up my child.
Let's do it now.
But let's get it done. I can rehab it. And it was, again, like deja vu, because I went into that surgery my strongest physical self, and it failed. And it launched my whole body into chronic pain, and I lost the ability to walk, and now I had nerve pain in 12 areas of my body. And it was a whole new level of a nightmare, because now I'm a mom. My husband and I lost our professional career together. I also had created this fitness app that now
you couldn't train,
couldn't add anything to. That was gone. I have my miracle 2-year-old child that I can't lift up, I can't play with. And the hardest part, again, was this mystery, you know, like what happened in that surgery. And because I had pain in so many areas, so I'm going to all these different specialists.
It's supposed to be my hip and it's everywhere.
Yes, it just started. It was like this catapult of from one to the next, because the hip too is the most important joint in the body as far as stability, because it's the biggest weight bearing joint and connects the upper and lower body. So the ramifications can be huge, but the way my body reacted was crazy.
Do you believe, like, because of what you had gone through, that it was almost like your body was like, oh no, this is happening again, and it was like a trigger response?
Yes, had no idea. So the surgery did fail. They left me with a hole in my hip capsule, which took over 3 years to figure out, because it's not visible in an MRI. So there was an actual physical catalyst that my brain was like, this is wrong. But to your point, yes, which again took several years for me to figure out of desperation. I realized the way my body was reacting so violently, like anyone's body would have had challenges because there was a hole there, but the way mine was
down again.
Also driven by the trauma and neural memory of fighting for my life. So my brain, those deep alarm bells were like, alarm, alarm, here we go, round 2. And it just went into fight or flight and overdrive, all subconscious. Like this isn't a conscious pattern I'm thinking through, but those deep protective patterns that had that memory sent fight or flight signals that amplified the pain, spread the pain, and launched my whole body into chronic pain, which again, no one told me any of this. It was just desperation of 2.5 years. We threw everything but the kitchen sink. Western, Eastern, alternative, regenerative, all the biohacking. Like if it exists, I did it. I tried it. I was like, okay, we're going to do this.
Like, I've done this, I can do it again.
But I didn't get well. I just kept getting worse. I was diagnosed with 5-6 different chronic pain conditions that are lifelong. My family, we were spending everything we possibly have to get me well, almost losing our home. We're living in hell. I'm sleeping maybe 2 to 3 hours a night, just in relentless pain. And I'm told it's downhill from here. Like, this is your life, you know, and it's not just my life, it's my family's life.
Now you've got a family.
Which was a whole new level of guilt. Like, because I was going through it, they were going through it. I was missing out on all these things I wanted to be a part of with my daughter. My husband had to do so many more things. Our dynamic was so hard. I was in so much pain. We weren't going out and having fun date nights or we were going to doctor's appointments, and this is extending for years. And so one night it was that breaking point, right? That sometimes, I wouldn't say sometimes, I would say is usually the greatest catalyst.
It's
right?
like everyone has these moments where they'll never forget, where you choose something different.
Absolutely. And it's usually from desperation.
Right? Your lowest low, where you're like, where do I go? What do I do? And what was that moment like?
It was probably the scariest moment in my life, which is interesting given everything I've gone through. But I for months had maybe slept, like I said, 2 to 3 hours a night. The strongest painkillers wouldn't do anything for me. And I was on my bedroom floor. My husband and I were sleeping separate so he could get sleep, because I was up all night. And I remember I was laying on the floor in the fetal position, just rocking through this pain. And earlier that night, my husband and I had talked, and I was like, I don't know what else there's to try. There's nothing. And which was scary in of itself, because now what? And so that night as I'm up and I'm thinking about that, I really had this moment where I'm like, I don't want to do this. And I wasn't going to take my life, but it was the first time with everything I'd gone through where I was like, God, you can take me.
Yeah, because you're in so much pain.
And my family, and that scared me because I had refused to die. Like I had already lived through something where I could have died, really, if I had been like, I'm out. Like my body would have been like, thank you. And so for me to get to that place where I was starting to lose that will scared me more than anything I ever had. More than being told I was going to die. It was, wow, if I can get to this place, my heart just opened to empathy for people who get to that place in their life. And I laid there thinking, what's my life going to look like if I just do give up? I give up, I stop fighting, I stop searching for answers. This is my diagnosis. This is my life. It's hell. And this is until I die. And that part of me that was still there, of course, was like, I'm not going to accept this again, right? That at 13, she was still telling me I'm not going to accept this. So I'm going through, well, what options do I have? There's nothing outside of me to utilize. And so I'm going over all these appointments and what the doctors had said, and that was that collective, well, your nervous system flipped a switch into pain. That's what chronic pain patients do, right? They flip a switch into pain. Likewise, your nervous system flips into anxiety, into depression. Wasn't always that way.
Right. Isn't it to protect? It's like a protecting mechanism.
It's a protective mechanism. Yeah. Always.
It's so crazy.
Always. It feels like punishment.
Right.
Right? Whether it's in your body or your mind. Right. But it's always rooted in protection, which again, didn't know at that time because this was 8 years ago, before neuroscience was really being spoken about on a very public space. But I just thought, well, if it can flip into pain, I'm going to figure out how to flip it back. And that next day, I started studying neuroscience 5-6 hours a day, thought of going back to school, looked at all the criteria and realized I'm going to waste a lot of time studying things irrelevant to what I'm trying to understand. And so I just subscribed to all the neuroscience journals, which is the gift and beauty of this age of information. And my life literally depended on it. So everything I studied was understanding what all contributes to your nervous system getting stuck, essentially in these survival mechanisms, which looks different on each of us based on our genetics, biodiversity, our life experiences, our personality. And how do you start healing that? Not just regulating it, because there's a lot of talk today about regulating your nervous system, which you can do by grounding, by breath work, by meditation, by sauna, by cold plunge. And those are all beautiful mechanisms, and I use them. But I didn't want to manage my nervous system the rest of my life. I wanted to actually change it. I wanted to rewire it. I wanted and believed, because of what I'd gone through, I could get free of this. And that's what I studied and became my own guinea pig. And I was merging the science I was reading with my lived experiences, both when I was younger and now as an adult, and creating a process, because that's what I realized was missing, was a process, not just try this, try that, but what's step one, what's step two, how do you partner with it to turn off those protective mechanisms that by now it's like, I need to keep doing this for your survival. And then how do you start to first get it on board to let those go, to then actually rewire something different? And that journey led me to create bioemotional healing, and it saved my life. And now I've been coaching clients through it for 6 years.
Is that what you call bioemotional healing?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. It's so crazy too, because I am a big believer in like trigger responses. It's like you could be driving down the road and my husband taps on the brakes and all of a sudden I'm like yelling at him and I'm like, what just triggered that response? I'm not really that mad at you. You didn't, you know, like, and so I've been very fascinated in this because I believe there's like past memories that we're unconscious to that trigger a response. And I believe that the same can happen inside like our body. So this is like new to me, but it's interesting to hear you even talk about like, okay, if I triggered this response, if this switch flipped, how can I get out of it? And I think a lot of times in life, people just accept. They just say, nope, this is the box I live in, this is the condition, this is the family, this is the religion, this is the area, this is this. And they just don't even consider another possibility. And one thing that I like am always preaching and teaching is like, you never know if you don't try. You never know if you don't consider that maybe that's not where you're supposed to be. It's like, what does it take to rewire your brain? How do I do this? So you're like, okay, I'm going to go study every single book I can think of to try and figure this out. So talk to us a little bit about how this works. I mean, I know you have like a whole full-blown like coaching program, but I would say like for women, we were talking about this before the show, like anxiety is huge.
Yeah.
I mean, I have my own practices for anxiety. Like I love working out. That seems to help. And but there's all these things where it's like, but why is the anxiety happening in the first place, right? And again, we were talking about before this started, it's like, I do believe that anytime there's change, our body like freaks out because it's like, wait, you're leaving the land of safety.
Yes.
And it's funny because it could even be like, well, I just hired 4 new assistants. My life just got easier. Why am I more stressed out? Right. And it's because our brain tells us like, you're trying something new. So then how do you flip that where you're like, the new is safe? Is it just take like reps, or talk to us about that?
Well, and it depends on how severe that person's life has been, right? And how many things in their life were altering, were out of their control, right? Were traumatic, if you will. And trauma is talked about a lot, and clearly there are traumatic experiences, but trauma to the brain is anything that changes the brain. So I could go through something and now I see the world different. Right. I could believe in myself and go through something and now I don't believe in myself, right? I see possibilities and now I see limited. You know, I used to trust people, but now I don't. And I don't even trust myself, right? So anything that alters the brain in that way and how you see yourself and you see the world and how you interact with people, that's a trauma to the brain. Right. It changed it, right? So depending on people's past and how much their brain has been altered and now has that data bank of memory to validate those protective survival mechanisms, that's where the process is a must, and why so many people feel broken, because they're like, I've got nutrition, I'm exercising, I'm doing breath work, I'm doing cold plunges, I've got my infrared sauna, I've even got a PMF mat, like I'm grounding every day, you know, I'm getting sunlight, and they're like, why aren't I able to get over this? And that's just my message is that can be enough for some people. Right. For others, your nervous system has decided this is what I need to operate in. And it could very well, again, be anxiety. That's really always operating to look at future threats of what could go wrong, right? Because now the brain's like, well, if I can predict it, I feel very safe. Because the brain is a predicting machine. The brain is in charge of everything. The only time it rests is when we sleep. And so prediction is safe, which is why the brain loves familiarity, which is why even good changes can activate stress and anxiety, because it's unfamiliar. So the brain will always seek the familiar hell over the unknown greatness or joy or healing or prosperity, because that's not predictable. The brain loves to know as much as it can what your day, your life looks like. So when you change things, that's why change is hard, just for the brain in those mechanisms. And some of us are more flexible if our life hasn't had a lot of instances that have made our brain more rigid. Because of how it's been changed.
So then if somebody, you know, they open up opportunity for their life to get easier and then they're stressed, what do you recommend? Are you like, don't worry, in time this will become your new norm? Or how do they get over this anxiety when they're like, why am I feeling this way when I shouldn't?
Yeah. First and foremost, just know it's whatever's familiar. And the brain practices neural pathways. So if stress has been familiar for a long time and operating on the go, do, I've got to survive financially, I've got to survive to keep my business afloat or my marriage afloat or my kids afloat or whatever it is, those neural pathways get practiced and they get stronger. Just like when I practiced dance, I became better. Our anxiety practices, our depression practices, our negative thought loops and beliefs practice. So they actually get stronger and those neural pathways get larger and they become the default, which is why the brain can do them reflexively. It doesn't require any effort. It just goes, this is what I do.
It's easy,
This is who I am. This is how I think, which is why a lot of people, if they're not feeling anxious, their brain will find something to feel anxious about, or create a fight or something just to get back into that familiar space, which is like, oh, here I am. Right. So it's hard because the things we want most are unfamiliar. And they put us not only in a place of vulnerability, but our brain and nervous system are like, I don't know this. Who are you? What does this look like? I can't predict anymore. So if you understand that basic mechanisms, you can start saying, wait, there's nothing actually wrong with me. This is not me. This is my brain.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's literally like, in this instance, it's having a conversation with the brain. It first starts with that awareness of what's wrong with me. I should just be happier or positive and my life is good. Why am I like this?
Why do I feel this way?
So then shame and guilt come in, and women especially are so good at criticism, right? And just to point that out, and then I'll circle back, criticism actually locks down the neural synapses where the brain communicates. So it actually prevents you from changing the brain.
So by criticizing yourself, you can't even have the power to change.
That's right. Especially that harsh self-criticism that, again, we do so well. That's connected then to shame, guilt. What's wrong with me? I'm so broken. I am a bad mom, a bad wife. Like, you know, all that downhill talk that we go. When we're trying to change something, we cannot, from a pure neuroscience perspective.
So how do you not
change?
How do you not like critique yourself? How do you not?
And that's the key. Self-evaluation is different than self-criticism.
Okay.
Self-evaluation, which is crucial to life, is like, this is one of my weaknesses. I need to do this better. Communicate. I need to stop procrastinating. I need to communicate this better. But self-criticism is tearing yourself down as a person, right?
Like, I'm not good enough. I'm not
exactly. I'm not good enough. Nobody likes me. I'll never be loved. I'm not smart enough, right? So that's the difference. Self-evaluation is actually rooted in, I want to look at these things so that I can change them, because I love and believe in myself enough that I want to be better. I can lay my ego aside to be like, okay, this is what I want to work on. But it's still rooted in this sense of worth.
Right. It's interesting too, because like, I do feel like the mom guilt and all that is so real. And I got to this place in my life where I was like, okay, I'm not going to live in this space of guilt. This is actually taking me like even further into like a darker place that I don't want to be in. And so when I realized that in myself, I'm like, but if I'm feeling this way, I need to look at why I'm feeling this way and self-evaluate, just like you said. And I didn't realize I was self-evaluating, but now it makes sense. And I'd get to this place when I'd feel that guilt. I'd be like, oh, it's just like a friendly reminder. Like, why are you feeling this? Where are you at? Okay. And then it's almost like you can do self-therapy for yourself, and you're like, okay, I understand why I was feeling that way. And then you're not living in this land of guilt. You're just like, okay, I figured out why. I need to do X, Y, and Z and kind of move on. But I feel like you're more of like the expert that packages it so well. I'm like, tell me more. I love this. I love all this.
Well, emotions are just teachers. Emotions are just teaching us what's important or what's missing or what we're desiring, or what is also from the past that has impacted us. Like, they're just teachers.
Right.
If we weren't so have an alarm around them, I think especially as females, because especially back in the day we were told like, you're just so emotional, and feeling like we either couldn't be or had to stuff them down, or we weren't tough if we were also emotional. All these things created this threat response around emotions, because we don't want to get stuck there. We don't want to be defined by them. And a threat response always amplifies. So as soon as we start to go, okay, guess what? I'm a human. I'm not a robot. And I'm speaking from my own journey of experience, because I was like, you're going to be fight. You don't get to feel sad for yourself. You're going to survive this, which was part of what wired my nervous system into fight or flight also, because I was a fighter and I was tough, and you don't get to feel bad for yourself. You don't get to cry, and because we got to survive, you know, and that served me. And I'm not saying we don't have those seasons, and we need kind of more of that today where we're losing grit. Like, I'm not saying we don't need that, but we forget that we're humans, and I don't care how tough you are. You're a human being experiencing life, and that experience is going to impact you. And in fact, thank goodness, because that's where empathy and growth and compassion, because life is contrast, right? If we don't know the dark and the hard, we really don't have the gratitude and the joy and the appreciation. So as soon as we can give ourselves permission to say, I'm a human experiencing life that comes with emotions, instead of being afraid of them, instead of judging them, which will just reaffirm them and amplify them as far as the brain goes, but sit with them and learn from them. And take that time, because we usually are like, I don't have time. I got the kids, I got work, I have...
Shove it down. Don't talk about it.
I don't have time. But then it's the thing that keeps your life from being able to be how you want it to. So sit with them. And one of the most effective free tools anyone can do is write. Free write. I don't mean like a journal, today happened. I mean write whatever's coming to your mind, the ugliest, the most
Get
fearful, get it out. And there's been over 200 neuroscience studies on how writing allows the brain to slow down.
Process.
So anxious brains, right? The brain can just ping pong. Here. What about this? What about this? What about this? And even though we're thinking on it, we're not going anywhere. The brain's just ruminating, and it's reaffirming those neural pathways so that it's going to predict it to happen again tomorrow.
Right.
But when you write, and again, studies show you can physically or type
it out.
It slows the brain down because you have to create some space of thinking to writing. And in that space is where some of those deeper, some of even those unconscious connections can actually come out, even more so than even speaking, because speaking we can go very fast as well.
Yeah.
And sometimes when we're speaking to someone else, there's fear of judgment. They have their own opinions. When you're writing by yourself, you can write whatever you want, because this is writing you're not going to keep. Because if you're going to keep it in your drawer, most people are not going to be fully honest. Right? Because what if someone reads it one day?
Right. It's like something you write down and throw away. You're like, I got that out, and it was like good for the brain. And
that's a beautiful way, because people are like, well, how do I sit with it? How do I learn from it? I promise you can be your greatest teacher and therapist in many ways by just giving yourself space. Set a timer. Give yourself 10 minutes. Okay? If you want to keep going past 10 minutes, do. But I promise you have 10 minutes. Go do that instead of social media. Like, instead of distract and suppress, 10 minutes to actually be kind to yourself and listen to what your brain and body are trying to tell you. And you will understand better that way. That is one of the most effective ways to get clarity on why you're feeling a certain way, or why your brain is ruminating over and over and over again. So you move from ruminating to processing.
It's interesting because, I feel like this happens so much in life where like things are going really, really good, and then we self-sabotage. Why do we do that?
Beliefs. Beliefs. Well, and a lot of them are unconscious. In fact, most are, right? And they're beliefs that formed throughout life. I mean, I have a qualm with how everyone wants to only talk about inner child work, because childhood is very important, obviously crucial. But some people are like, I had a great childhood. Why do I have anxiety now, right? Or why do I have all these issues now? I had a great childhood. And I'm like, you've lived a life. So it could have been last year, it could have been in your 20s, right? So beliefs form throughout life because our brain has to have meaning and attach it to our experiences. So we go through something, and on the surface, you might have what you believe that event was, but the brain is always creating a belief system to make sense of it, because everything to the brain comes down to meaning, and usually that meaning gets attached to us. Right? So I'm not lovable, or I'm not worthy enough, or I'm not good enough, or I always self-sabotage, even that, or I always procrastinate, or I'll never get there, or there's this fear because what if my family, we have all these beliefs that form through life that the brain is doing unconsciously to make sense of our experiences. And one of the strongest mechanisms in the brain is to hold us in alignment with our beliefs. Has to, because that's part of its prediction. So that's where taking the time to sit with our emotions, what's running through our head, because they all point to beliefs, right? Is when we really can start to understand, and what are my beliefs and what are beliefs that I extracted from my family or my coach or my parents or my friends, because even things we hear over and over and over again become beliefs. So I even had beliefs that I heard from experts from so many years, like your body heals so slowly, your body heals so slowly. And so for a lot of my life, I believed in its capacity to heal, but I remember even just saying like, God went to sleep in my creation and the wires didn't get connected. And so like, I just have this body that is going to heal slower. Until I was like, wait, do I want to believe that?
You're like, why am I believing that?
And my brain was like, well, we have proof. Look at how long your illness, look at all your injuries in your dance career. And I'm like, yes, but this is where the important thing, your beliefs are always based on the past. That's why they're hard to change. Because your brain will say this and this and this are why we have this belief. Remember? And you can then say, yep, you're right. Like, I'm going to have compassion. I'm not going to fight with my brain. It's very, very smart. And saying, you're right. That was true then, but I don't want it to be true now. And I don't want it to be true moving forward. And so what do I want to be true? So instead of, I don't want to feel this way, which is what we do. I don't want to feel this way. I don't want to feel this way. But the brain does not know don't. It just hears what we're focusing on.
Right.
So we have to ask ourselves, well, what do I want to be true for myself? What do I want to believe about my worth, my potential, my possibility, my health, my mental health, my physical health? And I've got to start speaking that. I've got to start repeating that so my brain starts to hear that. And then I have to ask myself, if I believe that, how would I act differently?
Right.
Because you have to create new evidence, because otherwise the past evidence will be too strong,
right?
And the brain will go back to it.
It's crazy because before I started my brand, I was like super introverted, like not like would never do podcasts. And I remember thinking, I'm like, it's just reps. Like I need to get out there, speak, train. And now it's like I can get on stages and speak and comfortable. But in the beginning, I was scared. So do you believe like you almost have to, like the anxiety might be there, but in like making yourself do certain things, it's going to like alleviate some of that anxiety or stress or whatever it is?
Yeah. For most people, because I know I have some people here who their nervous system is so stuck.
Okay.
That's where the deeper work, right? Like has to happen. But for anyone, we often wait until we feel a certain way. And often we've got to act and create some evidence that then brings in a feeling of confidence, right? Because if we always just wait until we feel, we're going to wait. And we're going to keep waiting. And so even I tell people, well, if you have a fear of public speaking, don't go speak on stage yet. Like speak in front of a group, right? Like
start small.
Start to create some evidence or just speak to your spouse and share something that maybe you've been suppressing, like, or a friend, like start to use your voice, right? I've even had clients where I'm like, use voice notes, because they're afraid to even hear their own voice out loud, right? So for some people, it's not enough. We have to change the nervous system. For a lot of people, it is enough to go through what I just spoke about, start to question, start to reframe, and then say, what is that next little action step? So I can start building evidence to my brain that that's possible, because we want to go from here to here,
and we're not there yet.
Those little incremental steps that the brain starts to go, okay, maybe I am a person that feels this way, or I do have worth, or I do have confidence, because look, I'm executing on my word. And that's where a lot of people went wrong with like The Secret and visualization even. It's like you can do the most powerful 1 hour meditation visualization, but if the other 16 hours you're awake, you're still operating exactly the same way.
Not gonna change.
That's stronger. That's creating a stronger neural connection than the most powerful visualization.
Well, I love how you said you have to create like new memories and new evidence, because then it's like, I'll tell my husband all the time, I'm like, well, I'm not that person anymore though, because we'll even get in an argument or something, I'm like, yeah, but that's not me anymore, so you can't bring up the past anymore because I don't operate that way, or whatever it is. What do you do with somebody who is in like this tough spot and they can't get out of it? Because I've coached thousands of hairstylists too, and I'm like, I can't want it more than you want it. Like I can tell you, like, do your Facebook lives and start here and do this, but I can't force you to do it. Like there's something off that you are going to have to figure it out on your own. What kind of coaching or advice can you give to anybody who's listening out? They're like, well, that's not me, that's not me, that's not me, and they're just kind of like stuck in that story or those patterns. Like how do then they do the deeper work to get out of that?
Yeah. Well, first being willing to admit that you're your greatest block, right? Because often with that, we'll be like, well, I'm not you, or I don't have that capacity, or I don't have that talent or that skill, or my family. So we have to, and those things are all true. We all have different life experiences and strengths, but we're our greatest limitation. And I'm speaking from someone who had things happen to me, right? Like I didn't choose this illness when I was younger. But even still, I had to say, I am my greatest either roadblock or facet to freedom, right? Like, what do I do? So most people, though, they just want to do the thing and not look inside, right? Yeah. Like, I want to do the live, but if I can't, and some people can, they just have to start and they'll build momentum. Other people, they might get crippling fear or anxiety that really prohibits them because their brain doesn't feel safe. And so the brain will do all types of things to get you to not even do it, right? So for those people, obviously, those are my clients. But to first, again, it starts with, okay, I'm not broken. This is my brain. These are protective mechanisms. based on what? Okay, let me just look at my life. What have been some significant experiences, right? That have altered me, not just childhood, but my whole life.
Right.
And you know what those are. You can still feel them. They still trigger you. You feel them in your body. You might get tearful, right? They come up in you. What are those experiences that you know had an impact on you?
Right.
All right, make a list. And then start to dig deeper and say, well, what are some of the beliefs that came from that? Right? And how is that impact me today? Pay attention to your triggers, right? They're always showing you where we still need to heal. That doesn't mean other people don't do things, but it is always about us, because the reaction comes up from us. And so again, just like emotions, pay attention. Like we don't want to create triggers, but we also don't want to just avoid them. We actually want to go, I'm triggered.
Why am I triggered?
Let me create time and not just be mad at the person or situation that triggered me. I'm not saying they might not have responsibility there also, but we have no control there. So why is this so activating for me? And let me give myself time, because that's what we don't do. I don't have time. I'll sit down and talk with my friend or my child.
I don't have time to self-assess.
And your brain and body are like, I'm trying to tell you. And I'm going to tell you through anxiety, or I'm going to tell you through gut issues, or I'm going to tell you with autoimmune. But if you don't take the time to understand and start to work through this, I'm going to keep telling you. And then I'm going to get louder. And then I'm going to start screaming.
That's crazy.
Which is why a lot of anxiety then starts to lead to panic attacks. Gut issues get so debilitating. One autoimmune leads to another one, because our brain and our body are always trying to communicate. They really are fighting for us.
They're speaking different languages.
But the only way they know how to get our attention is through alarm signals. That's the only thing we pay attention to. Right? If there's stuff that's really hurting us, but we're still healthy and great and we're totally, we're not going to pay attention to that. So that understanding is so important, to start going, alarm bells, why? Let me give myself some grace to actually ask and sit down and make this list and start to understand myself better, because we know our reactions, we know our mechanisms. This is what I do, this is what I think, this is who I am, but we don't know the why beneath. We know the surface. But really, what is this connected to? And look, let me give an example, if that helps. I'm a recovering perfectionist, okay?
As most women are.
As most women are. And I, from a young age, strove for excellence, right? I had a drive. But perfectionism is something different, right? It's those rigid, all or nothing, not good enough. That line is always being pushed, because it's so subjective, right? What's perfect? You and I are going to have a different opinion, and I'm going to have a different opinion next year, right? So that perfection got worse with time, and so much so that it was ridiculous. I got my first A- in college and I cried. I know, it's embarrassing. I was sobbing back to my apartment, and consciously I'm like, this is stupid. I'm embarrassed that this is why I'm so upset. Someone probably thinks someone died that I love. But deep inside were these mechanisms that would not let me let it go. Okay. And I was so hard on myself.
That's when it comes unhealthy.
Very unhealthy, because my success was so rigid, and what I termed was good enough. And again, there's great mechanisms to it. I wouldn't be here today. You wouldn't be here today if there wasn't that pursuit of excellence. Right? But the shame, the guilt, the self-criticism, never enough, never satisfied. And it was not until my chronic pain journey that I had to sit with this and really understand why. Yes, I'm a person who's driven, but this other side, which I know is not healthy. And only by going through these pieces did I finally, my brain go, Ashleigh, if you're not perfect, you're going to die. Right? Same way, I had a dad with temper. And so we walked on eggshells. And a lot of people I know can understand this, whether it's a mom or a dad. But the more perfect you are, the better the home is.
Yelling.
Right? So I learned from a young age, perfect equaled safety.
So you always.
And then I went through my illness, and I was the perfect fighter, the perfect patient, and I defied the odds. So my brain was like, perfect works.
Wow.
In fact, perfect is a must.
Yeah.
So deep inside, my brain made a connection. If you're not perfect, you're going to die.
Yeah,
See,
wow.
that's not conscious. That's not logical.
Right,
That's
right. That doesn't even make
limbic
sense.
system. That's emotion based on experience. And until I worked through that and dismantled that and said, yes, actually being perfect did help me as a kid, right? And again, what's perfect? And I'm not saying I was, but
Right,
that
the
idea,
idea.
being perfect helped me defy the odds. But we don't need to do that anymore to keep surviving and
Did you
to
have a
be
moment
safe.
when you were like, I need to surrender this idea of being perfect?
Yeah, it was a long journey to get to there, to where my system finally felt safe enough to look at that.
Yeah.
Because it was so rooted in evidence of the need. And what I had to do for my brain again is have this conversation saying, I'm not going to let go of all that I am. I am still going to strive for excellence, and I'm not going to sit around all day and do nothing with my life.
Right.
But what I want to let go of is that rigidity and the
Yes.
shame and the guilt and the not good enough, and almost like I have to earn it, right? Because that was also tied to survivor's guilt a little bit, which is crazy. You
Right.
hear about that when people survive accidents or something. But I saw people die all the time at hospitals and clinics that I was at. And it was
Yeah.
like, I defied the odds. I've got to earn this life that I've been
Right.
given a second chance at. So
Right.
it had all these personal layers with my childhood, my illness, and this just like remorse that I survived.
How did you come over this? Or how did you?
Through my process.
Oh, okay.
Right? And starting, first
It
of all,
wasn't like an overnight thing, right? It's
definitely not. Your
okay.
brain's not going to be like,
Right.
my safety is perfect and I'm just going to surrender that today. It was working through all these pieces and honestly thanking my brain. Like the fight or flight response gets such a bad name.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Right.
Like it's a beautiful mechanism. We just don't want to live there.
Right.
But that's where I was living. That's where people with anxiety are living, or depression or trauma or physical stuff going on. That's essentially where we're living. And I had to literally thank it. Thank you so much for letting me go through all that I have and survive it. But we don't need to do that anymore.
Right.
But then that's the other half of the program is then what are we going to now create, to which the brain can go, okay, I guess I can do this now. And I'm going to be okay. Because the brain can never let go of what's happened. It has an incredible memory, but we can work through the emotion and the wounds so that we can actually move into the wisdom, which is
Right.
really what we all want.
Well, it's interesting because it almost sounds like rewiring your brain is like you lost all your muscle. Now you got to rebuild it back up. That's not going to happen overnight. I think with everything, people are looking for like a quick fix often. Like, well, just tell me what book to read. Well, just tell me, tell me what course to take. And you're like, well, that's part of it, but this could be a 6-month journey. This could be a 3-year journey. We don't know.
Yeah. The beautiful thing, I know, and I don't love the word hack because I think it's like I want to bypass the effort.
Yeah, it sounds like a quick fix.
Right? But when we all know if we have the right knowledge and tools, then we can expedite the process, right? Which is why people hire coaches, right? Or I'm going to start a business. I want to learn from someone who's done it, right? I'm going to make mistakes, but I'm going to expedite my journey by learning through someone else's experience, right? And I've seen, I don't put limits on what's possible because I've seen people completely get free of anxiety in 9 weeks.
Oh, wow.
That they've had their whole life. And I've had clients who at the end of our 12 weeks together, they're maybe 60% better. And they keep going because bioemotional healing is a process. And by 6 months, they're here. And then by a year, they're here, right? So everybody's different.
Right.
But I know when we have a process, we expedite that journey. And that is the problem today. We can always learn. Right? And the brain almost sabotages us by learning. I'm going to just listen to a new book, a new podcast. I'm just going to go listen to a YouTube video. I'm going to go listen to some Instagram. And we have a million things saved, but there's no implementation.
Right.
Which is why a process is so crucial, because it's the implementation that leads to the change, not the learning, right? Learning isn't just powerful in itself. Learning used is powerful.
Do you believe that like the mind is essentially connected to the heart? Because like for me,
It is.
like you just said how, you know, if I read too much, I'm almost like, oh, I forgot to listen to me. I forgot to listen to hear. And it doesn't feel like listening to hear. It feels like I'm like listening to my soul, my heart, you know? So I'm like, how are these connected? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we know there's neurons in the heart, which goes back to that visualization and how if we don't feel it, we don't get that brain-heart
connection.
coherence,
Okay,
which is
that's
which is what must happen to create that neural memory, as if it did, brain-heart coherence. So we are so connected. And that's where the integration of knowledge is how it becomes part of us with our own experience. And I always say you have to do the whole person. That's the problem. is we either treat the body and we treat the mind and we treat the spirit, or we treat the trauma. And it's like, we have to treat the person.
Right.
We have
As a
to
whole.
look as a whole, because nothing breaks down alone and nothing heals alone. And we're so good at segmenting. Even with my type of work, you have just brain people, and then you have like body and somatic people. And bio-emotional healing does both cohesively, because if we're not doing the brain and body together, they're in a constant feedback loop, both the brain to the body, but also the body to the brain. So if we're not doing it together and looking at the person as a whole, then we're missing a piece that then keeps us in those patterns. So absolutely, because the brain knows the heart knows the brain. They're constantly communicating. The things that impacts the brain the most are the things that impact our heart the most. The things that hurt us the most, the thing that alters most, is the brain actually takes a snapshot neurologically and embosses it and replays it, because we're souls. So it's absolutely interconnected, which is why we have to look at them together.
Well, it's interesting because like any like major decisions I've made in my life, it's when like the brain and the heart have aligned, and I'm like, no, I know this is the path. I know this is the truth. Like my body and everything just aligned and told me to go, you know? So I think it's interesting that you bring it into like a more scientific way. And I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Like that makes sense why, you know, people, they'll feel a certain way, but then they're like, don't accept it to be truth, you know? And it's like, you have to get into this place where you listen to your body, you listen to everything that's interconnected.
And will I say, on that note, because a lot of women are like, but I don't know how. If the nervous system is so wired into survival mechanisms, it's very hard to feel intuition. In fact, sometimes almost impossible. Because intuition and touch, connecting with your heart, is letting go and trusting.
Faith.
It's faith in yourself, in the world, in God, in possibility. It's faith in what you can't see yet, but believe. And again, that goes in direct opposition to the brain's mechanisms of predict, familiar, know, certainty. And so I've worked with so many women who that's a sense of shame. I can't connect to my heart. I can't connect to my intuition.
And they're blocking themselves.
Well, their nervous system is. And so they're not able to do that until maybe halfway through the process. And then it's this beautiful experience where some of them, for the first time in their life,
oh my God, I've never felt this.
For the first time in their life, they can actually communicate with themselves. They can feel safe. They can feel that sense of intuition. And it's beautiful. So for any woman who's like, I don't know what that looks like, and they probably never have in their life, just because maybe their nervous system started to get wired into stress from a young age, that is possible, to where you can actually have a knowing that isn't logical, but inside, which is so personal, right? Because you're the only one who can know that.
And even if like I'll tell my husband or something, I'm like, well, I don't care if it's not truth for you, but it's truth for me. I already know. So I'm a believer in just kind of having that knowing, but love how you kind of talk about why what's happening inside the body. So I have to ask you, were you raised in any kind of religious upbringing?
I was.
What were you raised in?
Well, everybody knows us as Mormons, right?
Well, I was raised as Mormon too. When you said you're from Utah, I was like, can I ask right now? I'm like, I'll wait till we're friends. Let me
I'm an open book. I mean, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, right? We're Christians, but everyone knows us as Mormons. Yep.
Do you still practice?
I do.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. My faith is very important to me, and yet it's. I've had clients of all faiths, of no faiths, Muslim clients, Jewish clients, right? It's really what's important is a belief in something greater than ourselves, you know? And I'm very forthright. I'm a Christian. I believe in God. I believe in Christ. But I've had clients that believe in universe, you know, and it works. But I haven't seen anyone really overcome something significant without a belief in something bigger, because then all we have is logic,
and it doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
You can't even. I can't even believe that we're just human. It's just logic. It doesn't make sense. I'm like, there's so many things that happen that don't even support evidence of that.
And then you'll never be able to, because you'll only go off of what is known or what other people are telling you, right? And to believe you can heal your anxiety, heal your depression, heal your autoimmune, heal your body requires that you come from something greater that allows that to happen, right? And so at the end of the day, yes, my belief in God was one of the greatest catalysts. And really, it's one of the reasons I love the brain so much, because I believe it's one of the most merciful gifts given to each of us. Now, it can be the greatest prison in our life. Don't get me wrong, and it is. It's an epidemic today. Like the brain is holding us prisoner, both in physical challenges and in mental and emotional. But why I love it so much is like you and I are so different. Everybody listening is so different. We've had different backgrounds, experiences, different religions, different parents, different challenges, personality, strengths, intellect. Like we're all so different. Right. But the functionalities of the brain are the same.
They're the same, yeah.
And we're not talking intellect. The way in which it works and operates and communicates with our body and opens us up to possibility or locks us down into safety and familiarity, which is why I love it, because it's the greatest equalizer of our potential. Once people can really understand how it works, work with it, get it to a place to let go of these mechanisms that you've been stuck in and create something different. And that's why none of us are the exception to being able to change that.
Yeah. I love it. Everything you're talking about, it's like unlocking everybody's potential.
Absolutely.
I believe that we all have the ability to like see the higher version of us. And then we're like, well, how do I get there? So there's this like knowing of like seeing, you know, the bigger version of Ashleigh or the bigger version of Danielle. And you're like, okay, well, she's awesome. So I just got to figure out how to get there. So tell us a little bit about your programs and how it works.
I've got one program, Bioemotional Healing. And that, as far as, you know, what I walk my clients through, and it's a 12-week process. It's very hands-on, but my clients do it while living their life. And I'm a huge proponent of that, because I tell them the only way to heal your nervous system is by living your life, because anyone can go away and feel good.
Yeah, go on vacation. Yeah.
Then you're like, oh, now I'm back. Like we have to heal it while still being triggered, while still living in the life that stresses it. And I know that feels impossible, because I healed my body while still living in a body causing me constant pain and torture, and therefore triggering my PTSD and triggering my fear. So I know it seems impossible, but it's possible. So it's a very 12 weeks might seem short.
Is it one-on-one or?
It's a combination of one-on-one. And so I have some clients who go totally solo. Like that's an option there. And that just depends on the client, sometimes for privacy reasons. Other times, it just works better with their life, or if they're really sick and we have to go to slower pace. Right. But the group can also be beneficial. All my clients get one-on-one with me plus group if they go that route. Because sometimes our brain gets really rigid and stuck in a lens in which it sees life. And so sometimes someone else sharing, they're stuck, their nervous system is also stuck, but they have a different experience. And sometimes they'll say something or share something, connect something in you might not have thought of. And it helps kind of expand the brain's lens. It works either way, but there is a benefit to just other people's experiences sometimes. So it's twofold. It's my coaching. It's very hands-on for me, because the brain is tricky, but we can shift it. But that's why it's hands-on for me. But my greatest confidence is the process, because that's what I did. That's what every client has done. So it's not just dependent on if I'm having a good day or like we're talking and I'm like, try this or try that. It's the process that my clients follow. And then of course it looks a little different on everybody and takes on nuances, and different weeks resonate with different clients. But the first half is really getting to a place to understand, work through, so you're at a neurological level, you start to let things go. And then the second half is really about that creation of something new that the brain can then feel safe in. That's it. It has to feel safe in, and it has to trust that you can actually move into that. And that's so key, especially with people whose nervous system has been altered most of their life.
Have you trained anybody else in your method? Is this next? Is this coming up?
That's coming.
Because I was like, why don't you have coaches all over? I'm like, this got to be like a patent method that's got to.
It's coming. It's coming. I certainly. It's like that twofold. It's like a baby that's so precious to me, and the most important thing to me is outcomes.
I know.
You know, but at the same time, I want bioemotional healing to be known. I don't not even my name. I want bioemotional healing, and I certainly want it to last beyond when I die, because I've just seen miracle after miracle. But they're not. They're the capacity we each have. So that's on the horizon. I just actually spent this year just getting a system into place where I feel like more of me is there. so I can have that capacity, because
train other coaches and put in a whole nother time into training them.
But they'll have to go through bioemotional healing first. But that's my goal.
How long have you had bioemotional healing?
Almost 6 years.
Okay. Yeah. So you're ready. Let's go. Let's go.
I know. I'm like, see, I'm in an up level of having to trust.
Yeah. I get it.
And I'm going to do it right, because I've definitely seen it. Integrity is so important to me. And I want to make sure that whoever clients go to, they're going to get the outcomes. But that's coming.
I can relate to it, because I'm with my hair extension system I created. I was like, oh, only I can teach it. And now I have about 10 trainers, but it took me a while. I mean, it took me probably 3 years to where I felt like, I'm like, I think you guys are better than me. Shit. So I was like, oh, so,
and that's the hope though, right? Yeah. Like I would love that. 'Cause certainly I want to be able to help more people. Absolutely. Absolutely. And then it just takes it to other places versus everyone only working, with me and so forth. So that is coming. And that's my next up leveling of trying to feel safe and open with, right?
I know there's this element, you're like you said, I got to let go of my baby, but at some level you have to let go in order to grow.
Completely.
And so it's just like, it's almost it's an anxiety, but a good anxiety, because you're like, okay, I'm nervous, but a good nervous, because you know what's about to happen.
Well, and I don't want to die and have it die with me, because I want to be able to help more people. But yes, I mean, it's new levels, new devils, I always say, right? Like there's a new stretch that's asking a new capacity of me to trust and to definitely find the right people. But yes, that's next.
So if people want to come train or coach with you, where do they go?
Yes, they can go to my website, ashleighdelello.com, which I'm sure you'll link, because my name is not easy.
I already messed it up, sorry.
It's okay. ashleighdelello.com. There I have a free brain body blueprint, which is fantastic. Starts to disrupt your loops. It gives you a 3-step action plan to help get off survival mode, calm your emotions, calm the brain down. That's a great place to just start. Also have my podcast, which is coming back. But if you're like, I want to fix this now. Like I'm sick and tired. I've tried everything. That's usually my client. They're like, I've done it all. And this is it. Like, you're my last hope, really, is what I get all the time.
I feel like I'm in a good space, but even I'm like, Ashleigh, can I sign up for your program? Like, I'm ready. You sold me. Like,
well, it's, and I tell people that I have people in the most dire, and then I just have people who are like, I want to go to another place.
To me, I'm like thinking, I'm like, okay, I'm good, but why would I not tap into more?
Totally, completely, right? And let me expedite that process and not just manage it, but like get beyond, right? Get to that other place.
Like you're like making people superheroes. Like
they're superheroes already. The brain is a superpower. Like it truly is. And so if that's you from whatever spectrum, it's just really like, I want to change this. Like I'm going to take action on it. You can schedule a consultation from my website, and that's free. And that's because this is an in-depth work. So I make sure we're a good fit before we move forward. But wherever you are, if you're just like that feeling inside, there's more, whether you're totally desperate and you've got to find a solution, or you just are like, there's more and I want to get there now, then this is the work.
Love it. I love it. Well, you guys, she just like gave you so much knowledge. I literally am like, wow, this makes sense. A lot of the stuff that I'm like feeling and knowing, it's really nice to have you break it down. Like, I'm like, I know there's something beyond this, but it needs to be broken down in kind of a scientific way for us to almost like accept it. Like, oh, okay, I'm not crazy for having these feelings, these emotions, these thoughts. This is why I'm feeling this way. So you guys, if you are listening or watching this podcast, definitely share it. If you have a friend or a family member or anybody that you know that Ashleigh might be able to help, share it with them. I'm honestly going to sign up for your program.
Let's do it. And can I just say something I just felt like I wanted to say? Because I know most of your audience is women. I imagine a lot.
Probably.
And women just struggle a lot with all the roles, and I just, especially in the last 4 years, and like just the world, and we're at such a level.
Right.
And I just want anyone who comes through your podcast and in my form, they'll say your name, I'm going to offer a discount for.
Oh, thank you.
Because I don't want people to suffer anymore. Yeah. And like, I want all of us, I have male clients too, but if we get well, our families, our businesses, our coworkers, like we need it on a universal scale, like more than ever before. And people are trying to find solutions, and they're getting exhausted from doing everything under the sun, to where they feel like they have to do a million things every day to like function.
Yes.
And just felt the need to offer that.
Yeah, no, I love it. Thank you so much. I'm a firm believer that with all the biohacking and everything going on in the world, people are.
Yeah.
They're looking for something, and I do believe it's on a global scale. So I'm sold, you guys. Check Ashleigh out. Sign up for her programs. She might change your world. We don't know. Of course we don't. It's going to be amazing. That's the plan.
You're going to change
We're
your
all
world.
gonna play
I'll
it.
just help you get there.
I love it. All right, you guys, thank you so much again. Share this show if you found any value, and I'll see you guys next week on another episode of the Danielle K. White Show.